Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. This is A Backwards Glance, and I'm Sid Mickle. Our channel takes a nostalgic look back in time at some of the experiences I've gone through and some of the people I was very fortunate enough to spend time with. Today is Volume 3, and the timeline is somewhere around 1965. And we are going to move up from Volume 2 in the city of, or the community of Buffalo, right up the road to another small community, White Plains, Alabama. And why White Plains is important is in the location nearest what would be, I guess, the center of the community, there's a big curve on Highway 431. And in that curve was a small country store, and there's a house. Well, from the Buffalo house, my grandparents moved into this home. And one of the things that I remember the most about it is it's really scary. Driving to the house and being in that giant curve, you could get off fairly easy and park along the paved area in front of the house. But leaving, it was always like, what is going to happen when we pull out in this really sharp curve? Are we going to get run over today? Another thing about that house, I don't remember a single thing about that property except the front room, the very front room, and there's two doors. And in the center of it is a big picture window. And I'm going to show you a picture of that house right here. Okay, you see what I'm talking about there. Right behind that big glass window is the only part of that house I remember. And here's why. At that place, I read my second favorite book of all time. And that book is called The Caine Mutiny by Herman Wouk. I had it with me. My parents were visiting. I took it in and I left it. So we didn't go back for a week. So I read The Caine Mutiny on over 2 weekends in that house. And maybe that's why that building and just that location dominate my thought of that house. But it was my grandparents' really second home I ever knew them living in. And I spent several years there before my grandfather passed away and my grandmother relocated again. That house was just adjacent to my Uncle Fred's store, and that was Uncle Fred McKee. He was my dad's brother-in-law, married my dad's only sister, Catherine, who we called, of course, Aunt Cat. Well, Cat and Fred had two children, Mac, who was an older son that I really didn't know very much about or didn't really know him growing up. Sandra, closer to my age, we were first cousins. We spent time together, so I knew her quite well. But there's a couple of things about that store. If you remember from this earlier segment we talked about with Uncle Fred, he got hurt in a work accident, literally broke his neck. Went through a lot of rehab, and he could get around with two canes, and he was very slow, but he was a tough old guy, and he continued to work. Bought this store and bought a 70-acre farm right down the street. Well, I love going to the store because, as you remember from Mr. Pete Wilson's store, I really enjoyed going in and having someone buy things for me. That was one of my real skills as a young kid. Uncle Fred was just as generous as my grandfather at Pete Wilson's. It was whatever you want, just get it, don't worry about anything else. Well, I took that just a little bit too much to heart. He had a fishing supply section. Now, my grandfather White, was a very successful big fisherman, knew everything, it seemed to me, about fishing. So he had invited me to go fishing with him in Auburn at the University Catfish Lakes. Well, I'm there in Uncle Fred's store, and there's all this fishing equipment. And in my mind, I knew he didn't mean take anything here like that merchandise, but I did. I put some stuff in my pocket as a 8-year-old kid, and I was going to just take it and walk on out the door, rationalizing in my mind that he said, take anything you want. Well, it was a quiet afternoon. Everyone had gone outside, and Uncle Fred was just up at the front, and I started walking by, and he said, wait just a minute. And I'm like, oh no. And he knew. He had seen everything that was going on. And he asked me what was in my pocket. course, I started crying, pulled it out, and told him I was sorry. And here's what Uncle Fred said to me. He goes, I'm disappointed in you, but it's going to be okay. You're not going to ever do this again anywhere. And this is going to stay between you and me. It's going to be our secret, okay? Boy, was I was pretty relieved at that conversation, because my parents would have murdered me right outside that door had they known I had stolen something or tried to steal something from my Uncle Fred. They would have lost their minds. And I'm so glad, maybe he knew that. Maybe he knew that and was trying to protect me. Now, the second thing about Uncle Fred I remember very, very clearly was another event that happened down on the farm. We were raking hay. So he had a small tractor, and my dad drove the tractor for him and cut the hay, had it all out. We waited for it to dry over a week and went back. And I was hitched up to a mule-drawn hay rake. And I'm going to show you a picture. It may be that exact hay rake. Okay, that hay rake, by the way, is sitting under the back deck of Uncle Fred's store today. I don't know if it's the same one or not, but I like to think it is. So, okay, I'm out there. There's some hands helping us, some guys helping my father and do other things. And they would build posts, put posts in the ground and wooden arms off of it to keep the hay a little bit elevated off the ground so it would dry. We didn't bale it. We just stacked it up on those arms. I drove the hay rake for hours behind that crazy mule of hours. When the work was finished, you know, my dad, my Uncle Fred paid my dad, and my dad would give me something. He would do something for me. But he kind of felt like a roof, clothing, and food was that something. And beyond that, that was not a big thing on his mind, giving me money. So my Uncle Fred, when it's over, I'm sure he cleared this with my father. They were very proper with each other, had a great relationship. My Uncle Fred comes over and he says, I want to thank you for working so hard the past 2 weekends. And he hands me a $10 bill. Now, I got to tell you, I had never had a $10 bill at that time in my hand. And I felt pretty successful. I felt pretty rich. And I hugged my Uncle Fred about as hard as I could in his physical state. And I never forgot those two very generous decisions by my Uncle Fred. Now, my Aunt Cat was also a wonderful person, very generous, a flower grower, had flowers everywhere. Grew flowers in baskets. They had a big metal pipe thing set up where she could hang the baskets off of it. Every time my mother drove there, we came home with 2 baskets. She would take no money for it. So my mother really was hesitant to go. She just didn't want to take things from my Aunt Cat. Now, the other thing that's very important about this farm to me, and I want to tell you this story, it's where I learned how to drive inadvertently. My dad was there with that same tractor and a fertilizer spreader, a wheeled fertilizer spreader. We had the truck loaded up with bags of fertilizer. I don't know what it was, just fertilizer. So we drove up, and I'm sitting in the truck while he's driving around, and the field was terraced, stepped down to avoid erosion, probably 3 or 4 good levels of terrace. So my dad stops the tractor, and I see him waving. You know, he's waving his hat. Jump out of the truck, I run toward him. I get about halfway there, and I can hear him, and he's like, go back, bring the truck. So I turn around, and I run back, and about halfway I stopped, and I'm like, I don't know how to drive the truck. So I turn around and I go back, and I'm like, I don't know how to drive the truck. My dad goes, you get your so-and-so up that hill and bring that truck down here right now. Okay, let's go do it. This old 53 Chevy was a strange vehicle. You turn the ignition on. In the floor next to the gas pedal was a starter button. This big around, and you put your foot on it, turn your foot sideways, gave it a little gas with the clutch in, and away you went if it started up. Well, I got everything right except the clutch part. I didn't put the clutch in. It was in low gear, and away we went. It started up and down, and I'm going over the terraces. That truck is bouncing up and down, and I'm getting closer and closer, and I'm like, oh God, what do I do? So I get close enough, I think, to roll a little ways, and I remember the clutch. I turned the switch off, I pushed the clutch in, and I rolled down and get on the brakes and pulled up right behind the tractor without running over my dad or the fertilizer spreader. And I was incredibly proud of myself. And, you know, as a small kid, I've accomplished this goal. I'm going to get out, and I'm expecting my father to say something like, "Great job, kid. I really appreciate you bringing the truck." I get out, and my father's only comment to me was, "Don't drive over the terraces anymore. You're going to tear my truck up." That was it. Teaching moment over. Don't drive over the terraces. Now help me load this fertilizer spreader. That was my dad. He was not exactly the greatest teacher, but he was a really knowledgeable guy, not educated in any way. I think my father probably had a third grade education, but could do anything with animals, anything farming and mechanical stuff he could just figure out. I loved him dearly. I was scared of him. To be very honest with you, I was scared of him most of my life. And I was very lucky. My father and I had a tough relationship because he drank at times. Not very often, a couple times a year, but he drank and he couldn't drink. He had the lowest tolerance to alcohol of any human being I've ever seen before or after. He could have 2 beers and he'd be nuts. I mean, he'd be angry and upset. And it drove me crazy as a young kid, and it bothered me so much, and I was afraid of him. As I grew older, and certainly as I became an adult after he passed away, I really began to understand being uneducated, working in a textile mill, coming home and working, the load that he carried about the family didn't leave a lot of room for happy fun, playing with kids, and just being a jovial, nice guy. And I think he drank to escape that. I think that was his time off. Now, obviously, I really wish he hadn't done that, and I'm sure he wishes he hadn't done some of that himself. But there is a happy ending to this story. We'll get to why I was in the state of mind I was in at the time, but at age 18, I had failed at a few things, most notably playing ball in college. And I was really upset, called home expecting to talk to my mother. My mother always answered the phone. My dad never did. I call, he answers. And I'm upset, crying, really depressed. And my dad said, "Okay, get up here. Get in your car and get up here right now." And I was surprised at that. I get out, I go in. He and I had the first and one of the only man-to-man, heart-to-heart talks about life, what is given to you and what you have to take, how you handle bad things, and growing up. And I left that house and I cried the entire way home because it was the first time my dad and I were ever on level ground with each other. And I think he demonstrated to me just how much he loved me in that really tough time. And I'm incredibly grateful. I'm incredibly grateful that the good Lord gave me that one afternoon with my father. Times after that were certainly better, but unfortunately, my dad passed away within 6 months of that conversation. And just imagine how valuable it is to me with that situation. Had it not happened, things would have been a lot different with our understanding, I think, of our relationship and maybe our understanding of each other. But as much as I hated to lose him at age 49, it was a very, very positive thing for me to at least connect with him at some point. Well, we've run out of time here on our new YouTube channel. Just, we're limited to a 15-minute segment via YouTube. They're trying to cut out on robots and scammers and things of that nature, which I fully support. But until we get back together, if you like the stories, please hit the like button. It helps new YouTubers very much. If you enjoy it and you want to be notified of other stories, hit the subscribe button. That would make me incredibly happy because so far, a lot of my friends haven't really heard about this, I guess. Maybe YouTube or maybe my Facebook page was down and they didn't see my notification about this channel being available, because surely my friends would have subscribed by now. I'm just kidding. If you like it, subscribe. We hope to be back in a couple, 3 days. Take care of yourself until we get together. See you again soon. Bye-bye.